So welcome everybody. My name is Dana Levenberg. I'm the supervisor of the Town of Ossining, and I'd like to welcome you to our town engagement session about Project Forward, which is an initiative that we started some months ago to look at ways we thought we might be able to engage the public in thinking about consolidating government functions and making them more streamlined and hopefully in the long run less expensive, easier for the public to utilize, and let's just say hopefully better. But we didn't want to do that without bringing the public along. So we have we applied for a state grant, municipal restructuring fund grant, through the Department of State Local Government Efficiencies program, and we got that. Originally, we were working closely with the Village of Ossining to look at ways to consolidate our highway department functions with our parks functions jointly, but as we were moving forward, the village wanted us to slow down a little bit, and so we segued into looking more at town general and unincorporated town functions that wouldn't directly impact the village, or where the village wouldn't have to necessarily participate directly in the conversations. So we started looking at opportunities. And most of the time, when you look at functions, you're talking about people. And we saw some opportunities in people who thought they might like to be retiring soon. And they had given us indication that they were not going to be seeking re-election necessarily. So with that information, we started looking at some of the functions of those offices, which are the offices of Highway Superintendent, which services the roads and infrastructure in the unincorporated town of Ossining, as well as the Town Clerk, who serves as town village clerk through an intermunicipal agreement for the Village of Ossining as well as the Town of Ossining, and the receiver of taxes, who serves all of the town of Ossining, including both the villages of Briarcliff and the village of Ossining and the unincorporated town of Ossining, and collects the taxes, by the way, for the school district, as we are required to do in Westchester County. So looking at all of the opportunities for efficiencies, we also looked around to see what other governments had done and if there were any lessons that we could learn. And we understand that there are certainly governments who have gone in the direction of eliminating elected offices, especially for offices that are not policy-setting positions. So we're in the process right now of engaging you, the public, in conversations about if it makes sense or not to eliminate the offices of Highway Superintendent, Receiver of Taxes, and Clerk. And if we were to do that, then what would we be looking at? What would the picture look like if we were to eliminate those offices? And how would your services be impacted or not? Would they be better? Would they be worse? And that's where we really want to hear from you if you have an opinion about that. And we hired Michael Conti because he is an expert in public engagement and communications. And we thought more than anything, there's lots of different ways that other municipalities have gone about studying these, and there's many studies. And certainly this is not the first time that the town or the village has looked at these issues. We've consolidated courts. The village got rid of their court. We consolidated police. The town got rid of our police. Fire department. I'm going to have to come closer because the microphone isn't really working that well. So in any case, we've gotten rid of many duplicative services between the town of Ossining and the village of Ossining, and even some of our fire services. We are serviced by Briarcliff. We have a shared district for our ambulance services, the Mid-Hudson Ambulance District, and there's many intermunicipal agreements where we share finance staff, and we share our many other programs, and they're just not coming into my head right now. In any case, this isn't the first time that anybody's looked at this. There have been multiple studies. These are some of the areas that have popped in the studies as maybe low-hanging fruit, ways that we could operate more efficiently. So with that, today we're going to ask you to give us a little bit more feedback in addition to the feedback that we've already received through a survey that went out to all 10,800 parcels in the town general. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Michael Conti to talk to us a little bit about what he's helped us with so far in terms of public engagement and where we think we're going to go next. Michael.
Thank you, Dana. So, yes.
Dan, could you just say again what the responsibility for the receiver of taxes is? Is that all
Okay.
three?
Yes, the receiver of taxes collects for the town general, county, and both school districts, but not the two villages. That's right. Okay?
Okay, so to take a subject like this, which for the average person is maybe a little at arm's length, governmental function is something that we expect we don't really want to know very much about. We just want to make sure it happens, right? It's kind of a challenge for us, especially when we talk about getting rid of something that people might be used to. So what we did was we put together a website that has all the information in it that's relevant to this inquiry. And if you've had a chance to look at it, you'll notice that it's information about prior efforts, as Dana mentioned, has information, current statistics, current organization, where the grant came from, how much it was, and then the concepts that are currently under discussion. So what we did after this was posted and made aware to the public was we sent them a postcard. So every parcel got a postcard. Sure. So every parcel received a postcard, and that postcard said, go to this web address, please, and take the survey. There was a button here that said, take the survey. We were fortunate enough to receive 177 responses to that survey. And I'll tell you that very briefly, the responses, even though it was a self-select survey, meaning we weren't adjusting this for a particular voting profile, anybody could participate in the survey who received this postcard. We got fairly even gender balance. We got fairly well-organized representation from the three different areas of the town. And it gave us a start. So this is a survey. It's not predictive of anything, because surveys really aren't, especially unscientific surveys like this, but it's a starting point. It gives us a sense or a barometer of current perception. And the people who took part in this survey, generally speaking, were older. They had lived in the community longer than most. So they're influential. They understand the history of the community. They understand perhaps the history of issues like this. And as a result of them being influencers, they become very important in terms of the dialogue going forward. And the questions we posed to them were fairly straightforward. In addition to asking about town services, which just gave us a general benchmark, we asked specifically their sense of whether or not something like consolidation was worth pursuing. And we got fairly robust responses for that. We also asked specifically about these concepts of the elimination of the elective offices, as Dana mentioned. We also got very strong responses there. In fact, for the most part, the survey was unremarkable. It was largely positive if you think or support the notion of the elimination of these elective positions. It was very favorable in terms of the way in which people currently see services that are provided by the town. And it was encouraging of moving the process forward. And that's as much as we wanted out of a survey like this, because let's suggest for a second that the survey, yeah, I can't help that, I'm sorry, sir. So let's suggest for a second that the survey said precisely the opposite of what I said. That might be a point for the board to say, well, I guess we shouldn't move forward. The perceptions currently are that this isn't something that we ought to pursue. That wasn't the case. It was, yeah, keep going, because when you think about it, pragmatically speaking, we'd like to spend less money. That's really what this is asking. And the question is whether or not you think it's worth doing that in comparison to the new structure, whatever that new structure might be in terms of the delivery of services. So that's where we stand today in terms of giving the public a sense of where we have started, what's on the table, what the initial response is, And now the question ultimately will be whether or not the board would like to take this to the next level, which is ultimately requiring a public referendum. Because, again, it's in the hands of the public. It's not in the hands of those who are elected to serve. The public gets to vote on this, and in fact, it gets to vote on it based upon where they live. So that's an interesting component of how we move forward with the process. Now, Maddie is going to talk a little bit about what the services would look like. So, as I said before, some folks say, I don't care how the sausage gets made, I just want to eat it when it's served to me. That's the same notion. I don't care exactly how the streets get plowed, I want to make sure I can get out of my driveway. So presumably folks would want to know that they can still get out of their driveway if in fact services are changed, and that's what Maddie is going to address now. Yeah, sure.
I just want some clarification. You said to eliminate these positions. Are you saying eliminate them totally or eliminate them as elected, being elected offices? Are you saying?
Yes, I understand.
They should be appointed offices? No, not at all.
No, Maddie's going to address that. We're talking about getting rid of them as actual elective offices and then reconstituting the departments that actually provide the services.
So in other words, you really are going to appoint them?
No, that's not what I said.
Let's go to the next section.
Yep.
Okay, and
Yep.
then I think there'll be a little more clarification.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'll try to speak as loudly as I can, but if you can't hear me, please give me a flag. Pardon? I think it's for the camera, right? Yeah. So as Michael mentioned, we looked at a couple different concepts. Concept A, which pertains to the Town of Ossining Highway Department, which is only for the unincorporated area of the town. And Concept B, which pertains to the receiver of taxes, which, as the supervisor explained, is town-wide, and the town village clerk. So as far as Concept A is concerned, right now the structure is we have an elected superintendent of highways, we have 2 part-time clerical staff, and then we have basically the rank and file. So the gentlemen who are plowing your snow, the gentlemen who are repairing your streets, so on and so forth. We know that the town of Ossining loves their highway department. We don't expect anything to change. We don't expect things to get better. We expect them to be exactly as they are now if we were to eliminate the elected position of highway superintendent. And we have a couple different ideas about how those responsibilities would be reallocated, but certainly someone would have them. You would still have the accountability. You would call the same phone number. Probably the same staff would answer the phone, except for the elected highway superintendent. So we don't really foresee any major change in that department whatsoever. And as we talk about savings, it would be mostly administrative savings. And if you've looked at the website and filled out the survey, you see that it's a modest savings. It's not $1 million. It's modest, but it's a great place to start. And so basically, if we can trim some of the administrative overhead, we'll be in a much better position moving forward. And we absolutely foresee that you'll be getting the same level of service out on the roads as you're getting today. As far as how that's done, we had a couple different ideas, and that's certainly going to depend on the public feedback in terms of how those responsibilities get reallocated. So we could certainly... What was the number? Between 2.5% and 5%, I think, were the different... depending on the scenario and how we restructure the department, between 2.5% and 5% of the highway department budget. The highway department budget's about $3.5 million a year, so it's not sizable. It's a modest decrease. But if we're having an honest conversation about how we can save money, it's a great place to start. And as I mentioned earlier, the rank and file will generally not be affected. So the services that you're used to coming to your doorstep will see no difference. Sure.
If you eliminate the superintendent of highway, you've got to replace them by some sort of supervisor.
There are a few different ideas about how to do that.
Well, how's the money come out? The salaries? Are you going to hire a supervisor at a greater salary than the elected?
No, that is not the plan. Do you want me to go into a little bit? Okay, so we had a couple of different ideas about how that could be worked out. So we certainly have retired Town of Ossining Highway Department employees around who I'm sure would be very willing to lend their expertise to us. And as most of us know, if you're a pension New York State employee, you can't earn more than $30,000 a year. So if we were to bring somebody in for this position, it would be somebody to basically support and organize the rank and file, help the clerical staff out to give them their responsibilities, and that would be it. So about $30,000 is far less than what we're currently paying for a highway superintendent plus benefits. Another alternative would be to have one of the current rank and file members leave the union and take a stipend. That's also something we discovered. Now, some of these things have a little bit more to do with labor law, and we really want to get feedback from the public as to which they think we should pursue, because there is some legwork involved, but certainly would not cost any more than what it's costing today. Okay. Does anyone have any questions on the highway department component before I move into the next?
This seems like part of a larger plan. A few years ago, you reduced the salary. Before the elections, but after the candidates have been chosen, you reduced the salaries for both the receiver of taxes and the superintendent of highways. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Why?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I'm going to repeat the question for the camera. The gentleman asked, back in, I don't recall, 2014, somewhere thereabouts, is it true that the town board reduced the salaries for both the elected position of tax receiver and the elected position of highway superintendent? And the answer to that question is yes. Although certain changes were made along the line to both of those salaries, the highway department, his salary was restored, I do believe. That's something that was an issue for that board to contend with. That's a very separate and apart issue from what we're talking about today.
No, I think it's the same issue.
I can defer to the supervisor on that.
So we'd like not to get derailed, because we aren't going backwards in time. That was a different board, it was a different supervisor, and we're not going backwards. But yes, I know, but they're new people. Okay, so that, as mentioned,
Were you unhappy with the old people?
the old people have decided to retire. That's what I started off by saying that.
Was it reduced?
It had nothing to do with me. So I can't really tell you the answer to that question. It had nothing to do with either this current board, and I neglected to introduce Jackie Shaw, who's here also from this current board, but it was a different board and it was a different supervisor. And the decision was made for a variety of reasons that I'm not really privy to, because like I said, it was a different board. What we're trying to do now is engage the public in a productive conversation of how we can move forward. And part of that, you are right, there is a longer term vision for what that might look like down the road. Part of that is, as I mentioned at the beginning, the notion of consolidating park services, highway services, and cemetery services, because they all have very similar kind of job responsibilities under one. That's a direction that we are moving to in the town. And then if there are other ways that we can look for synergies with the village of Ossining, where, for example, we could share a salt shed, so we don't all have to have duplicative pieces of equipment that might be able to be shared. We do that now anyway, even without having merged departments, but in the future, we think that there's opportunities to do more of that. We're not trying, we have restored salaries, we have made people as whole as we can, to the extent that we can with the new board. We did that, and I think that we work with great respect for all the people in those positions. Since the receiver of taxes retired, we appointed a new receiver of taxes based on her thank you. I just couldn't come up with the word. Her qualifications. We felt that she was a CPA. She was somebody who had a great deal of experience in with finance and seemed to be qualified for the position. So we appointed her into that position. And then she ran for election, and in fact, the public endorsed that appointment by electing her to public office. Similarly, we had a position open on the town board, and we had an interview process where we interviewed people for the position based on qualifications. We solicited resumes from town, village, and village, and we reviewed them all with the town board, just like we would any other position that was a hired position, to look at qualifications and to appoint somebody who we felt was the best person for the job. Today, we have Jackie Shaw here before us, who was recently elected by the public, again, an endorsement of that appointment. So,
Was there an option not to elect her?
well, nobody ran against her, but certainly it's an option for somebody to do so. Anybody can run for office. So that's a choice that the public makes. They choose to put up a candidate or not to put up another candidate. And absolutely, that's what your vote work. That's how voting works. So when you say, is there a choice? When you talk about the notion of public offices versus, offices that are elected versus appointed, that's for you to decide if there's a choice or not. So you elect your representatives. We are your representatives.
There's not a ballot choice to eliminate the job as opposed to.
A town board? No. There wasn't a ballot choice to eliminate the job of town board. I was talking about Jackie for town board. Okay.
No, I'm talking about.
Receiver of taxes? There was not a ballot choice to eliminate that because we didn't feel that we were in any position with the public to go there until we'd had public conversations and engagements and asked people questions and found out if that was something that the public was interested in. That's where we are today. And yes, would it have been nice to have that done before the last election? I'm sure that our receiver of taxes would have been happy to not have to spend money campaigning. It is costly so to do those sorts of things, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't. It's also an opportunity to get out before your public and speak to them about issues of import to them, and to be able to take those issues back to your workings in your office. I absolutely believe that is true. 100%. Yes, come on over.
So I want to go back to the survey for a second. One of the questions that we asked was the motivation for people answering questions in a certain way. And one of the questions we asked was, do you think that the position of, let's say, highway superintendent should be eliminated? Yes. If you answered this way, why did you answer this way? The leading response was that this should be an appointed, not an elected position. Now, you can draw your own conclusions about why they may think that's the case, but that was the leading response. The second response, as to the affirmative, why get rid of this position, was because I'd like to see costs reduced. So it's important, I think, when you look at the way in which people think about these positions, there are going to be opportunities for conversation about whether a position should be elected or appointed, right? Well, obviously our representatives, those who make or have responsibility for all of the town's business, are always going to be elected. They are our elected representatives. It becomes the choice of the public as to whether or not certain positions that deliver services should be elected or should be fulfilled by people with a certain set of professional qualifications that have been evidenced in the past. That's really what's at work here today. Okay?
You've said that you looked at what other communities are doing. What have other communities done with these offices?
Is that where we want Victoria to jump in? Come on, please.
So I'm going to shift a little bit from talking about the highway superintendent position, because that is not something that I have much information about. But I do have the unique opportunity, experience of having worked in the town clerk and tax receivers.
I just want to introduce, this is Victoria Caffarelli. She works in the supervisor's office. Originally, that's what she was hired to, and currently she's serving as interim town village clerk.
Yes. And prior to working for the town of Ossining, I worked in the town clerk and tax receiver's office in the town of Newcastle for about 3 years. And in the town of Newcastle, this organization has been in place, this system has been in place for about 15 years. There is an appointed shared role of town clerk and tax receiver. So this allows one department to serve the community with both functions. This allows to have more staff serving the public when they really need it most. So for example, on tax collection day, you're going to walk into a department with perhaps 5 staff members as opposed to 3 staff members because the departments have been combined, and it can be all hands on deck when really the public needs it the most. In the town of Newcastle, it's set up that way, and I think the residents are very happy with the services that are being provided. So that's one example of how through this process, we can create a more efficient department with essentially less staff members to serve the public in the way they need it the most. So that's the one example I can kind of provide in terms of what could happen with the positions of town clerk and tax receiver here in the town of Ossining, like our neighbors have done in the town of Newcastle. It is one appointed position, town clerk, tax receiver. Okay. Okay.
I feel like, and the other thing I just wanted to mention, Victoria, don't go too far away. Victoria's had an opportunity to work in the clerk's office here in Ossining as well as the receiver's office. She's had an opportunity to kind of bounce around from office to office, and so she has a sort of unique perspective on what it's like in Ossining also. And I think that you can safely say that based on her experience in Newcastle and also her experience in Ossining, it doesn't seem like it's a huge leap to be able to consider that our offices could consolidate into one joint office. Just in the physical benefit alone, for those of you who've recently paid your taxes, and if you haven't, please don't forget that January 31st is the school taxes are due without penalty. You do have to go to the 3rd floor of a very old building. Many people don't want to take the elevator, and they take the steps, and the steps can be challenging. If you were to have a combined office, presumably we would be able to put both the receiver of taxes and clerk functions into the 1st floor office, and people wouldn't have to go up to the 3rd floor, and that would save time, save people parking. I mean, just in the logistics alone. I know it sounds simple, but it makes for an easier and sort of a nicer and more welcoming environment for that particular function, those two functions. And the other point that Victoria was making is that the timing of the different busy periods don't necessarily overlap. Most of them do not intersect. So when you have an office with more people in it, and presumably that would look like, I'm going to just take this over, I know Maddie was going to do this part, we would have receiver / clerk, and this is one concept, it's not the only concept, it's a concept. A deputy receiver and a deputy clerk, so those people could fulfill those roles if the receiver clerk was not there. And then we would have support staff, either 2 part-timers or another full-time person, depending on how we saw best fit to fill that other role, so that the office would always be covered and we would always be able to fulfill all of the needs, the permitting, the marriage licenses, taking taxes, taking in penalties, whatever needed to be done, FOIL requests, etc. Both of the offices are busy, but again, they have their big busy periods at different times, so it is a good synergy with each other. And then again, just to get a little bit back to sort of the long-term vision, I think I talked a little bit about for the highway department is to find maybe a way to consolidate all under one roof, the departments, as well as to consolidate, to reduce administrative functions. You're never going to not have enough trucks to plow or salt your roads. That you're always going to need people to do that. You're always going to need the machines to do that. But there are other machines that you don't use all the time. You don't necessarily need the vac all the time, or you don't need the sewer jet. You know, there are types of equipment, and there are, again, higher level managerial positions that could be reduced, or the costs could be reduced, and you could still have the same functionality, because the departments don't stop functioning without the senior level people there. They keep on going.
When you talk about consolidation, which departments are you consolidating? You consolidating the village and the town? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm not talking about
And is there a reason why we can't do that?
There's not a reason that we can't do that, except for public desire. We could do it. We feel that this is a step towards making it easier to potentially do that in a way that will still satisfy all of our constituents. So this is, we're going in the direction of, could we eventually do that? I'm not going to be the only one to say yes. You have to say yes. He has to say yes. He has to say yes. She has to say yes. That's the community saying yes. You know, the community, the next step for this is, after we sort of continue to go through and take, intake and gather public opinion. The next step would be a referendum. That would be the public deciding if they think that getting rid of these elected offices would make sense. Everything is a process. There's nobody coming in with an axe to just chop it all to pieces and say, okay, this is how we're doing it now. We think we're going through an iterative process with the public to try to find out how people feel about this, if they think it makes sense, if it's a little money now and maybe down the line it adds up to a lot of money. And maybe the public says, no, we don't want to do that. We like things just the way they are, and we're going to stick with it just the way they are. And then we continue on our merry way. And we have to look for smaller hanging fruit, I guess. Yes.
I'll just offer an opinion, which is for your consultants as well, and that would be that this is a representative democracy in New York. This is not New England, and where it's 100% participative. And I put before you all the happy things that are taking place in Great Britain right now as a result of going to the public with decisions, especially if we are going to be doing that on multiple levels over multiple issues. We elect, in my view, representatives to bring their judgment and their representative capacity to the issues, and to guide us that way. I don't think it's personally all that significant that we have a full-on vote by everybody in the community over stuff that is, kind of, in the overall scheme of things, pretty small potatoes.
Okay. I'm turning the microphone back over to, sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, on its face, that makes a whole lot of sense, right? Because the mundane workings of government, you elect your representatives to address those mundane workings. The difference here is that these are elected positions, and so elected leaders can't get rid of other elected leaders, because that's actually what happens in banana republics. We can't do that, right? So these have been established. These are elected positions, and it is only the people who get to decide whether or not elected positions are eliminated. That is, it's a difference that is still grounded in our representative democracy. So, but your point is really well taken in terms of, and I think supported at this juncture by what we've seen, at least initially, from the survey, and that is, in agreement with your point, this seems like lower hanging fruit. Are we, and should we even be having that conversation? Can't we just get it done? Well, there's a process here, because these positions have been established by public vote. So that takes us to the next phase, which is hearing from you folks about anything and everything else that we might want to and need to know in order to be able to go to the next step, which is really ultimately having the town board have this dialogue, looking at the survey, taking a look at what folks are asking about, and deciding whether or not they want to move forward with it.
And again, just to clarify, what that moving forward would be putting up to the public, asking the public if they wanted to host a public referendum, and then actually holding the public referendum. That's, the town board doesn't just get to decide, yes, we're getting rid of these elected positions. The public has to decide. Again, thank you, Michael Conti, for clarifying why that is, because of our democracy. So we had envisioned that we were going to break into small table discussions, but we don't really feel like we have. I mean, it's kind of up to you. I mean, again, we didn't want this to be an, you know, we're standing here and you guys were there. This is about public engagement. We wanted you to be able to have the floor at this point to talk about any questions that you have, anything that you think would be helpful to, if you haven't made a decision where you stand on this issue, what kind of information can we provide that would be helpful to help you make a decision about if this is something that the town should move forward with or not in terms of a referendum. So I'd love to hear from any of you. If you'd like to, we can sit, you know, together at this larger table or that larger table or these two tables and talk. If there's nothing more that you have to, here, I'm gonna hand back the microphone just so we can.
Why can't you simply go to an intermunicipal agreement between the town and the village on the highway department?
We could, but we have a highway superintendent right now, so that function wouldn't serve the village. Now, I will tell you that we do have two different unions, so it's not necessarily as easy as we'd like. We can't just snap our fingers and consolidate the two departments. It's not impossible, but a lot of times what happens when you merge two unions is everybody levels up to the highest one. And right now we're the higher paid union, and we have a much smaller staff. So that would, in the short term, increase costs at the village staff level. So, you know, ultimately that would get spread around for everybody to pay. And I think that that's one of the short-term challenges that we would need to work out. And it's not that it cannot be worked out. But again, the elimination of the elected office of highway superintendent would open up the door to our being able to move in the direction of having that intermunicipal agreement be more smooth, because again, we'd probably only want one department head that would be overseeing what would be a DPW. And they've done that in the town of Cortland, had gotten rid of their superintendent of highway some years ago. And again, there are certainly other models out there in towns that have. Actually, I was just reviewing a little bit of a study that the town of Bethlehem, New York had done, looking specifically at these three positions. And there are statistics that we can share about what is, and we'd have to update some of those statistics about, sort of what is happening, again, around New York State, in other communities where they have made the decision to move away from the elected offices. I'm going to keep handing this.
I'm sorry to be sort of monopolizing comments here, but with three of us, it's not that much of it. Four. Oh, good.
Matt joined us, and he's in the unincorporated town, so he's a resident. Don't try to be shy over that way.
I think I was listening to the governor's State of the State this morning, and one of the things that was mentioned, and I don't have the details, so I'm only sort of reporting what I heard, was that there was going to be a cutback in state funds to towns and villages but that there was going to be an increase in funds available for consolidation and efficiencies between municipalities, which I think, if it's true, puts a pretty solid platform under what we're doing here, and hopefully, we can maybe get some additional help that way.
So the money that we received for the phase 1 of this grant was kind of to further, it's implementation money, but it's the beginning phases of implementation. There's much more money available through this local government efficiencies from the state grant stream if, in fact, you were to consolidate your highway department under one roof. And they give you money to offset those initial expenses, and sometimes right at the beginning when you do the consolidation, like I mentioned, if you were to do an intermunicipal agreement, as the step or the solution, the beginning solution to making one department, that could cover those increased initial costs, and then again you start to see a leveling out. So you do get some bigger pot of money from the state if you're sort of really making those bigger changes. And the governor, the other elephant, I guess, in the room is, well, okay, why not just have one town or have a coterminous town village? And I don't know if you're going to go there, but that's how many people have said to you, why do we have two Ossinings? Well, we don't, it's Ossining again, it's not just Ossining, it's Ossining, lots of most of Briarcliff. Briarcliff has certainly expressed an interest in being their own coterminous town village. And I just had somebody reach out to me the other day about that to say, this is a hot topic right now, and they're looking at electing a new board, and they're talking about, well, when are we going to be our own selves? We don't want to be part of you guys anymore. Obviously, it's complicated. There's a large revenue stream that comes from Briarcliff, and they do enjoy our services such as our assessor and receiver of taxes for all of the school taxes, and our senior program and our parks. Lots of, all of the bigger unincorporated town services serve all of our municipalities. So it is complicated. It's not straightforward at all. It's not like a straight path. Not to mention the fact that, I don't know that the governor's program involves creating yet a new town, because you'd have to create the new, town village of Briarcliff. So again, nothing is impossible. Nothing is off the table. We are your representative government. We want to hear from you what you think would work. If you think that there's a direction that we should be going and it's a better one, we want to know what that is, and we are open for all of your ideas. So I'm not trying to close the conversation here, because Matt, I know you have something to say, right? No, okay, just joking. He doesn't have anything to say. But I just want to say that, if you have ideas, our ears are open, and we're very welcoming to whatever you have to say on the matter. So, Elaine.
Well, I commend you for this effort. And I think for years and years, we've been here since 1969, and this is a good spirit, Ossining is old in history, new in spirit, and it's a good way to go. We all want to save money, and if the services are the same you're providing, they've been wonderful so far. We have great coverage. We've lived in 4 houses in Ossining, 3 in the village and 1 in the town, and it's just a continuum of good service, but it's also duplicating services too. So I commend you for your effort. As long as these positions that you're eliminating and you're replacing it with people that do a number of jobs have the qualifications, that I would move that into the thing, so that when they take this job, whatever it's going to be, or however the configuration of it is, that they are totally qualified to hold that job, and not just because they were popularly elected to the thing, and a lot of people like them, but they may not be qualified. So.
That's a great suggestion. And I think that, you know, again, I think having the suggestion, and Michael and I were talking about that earlier, of what the protocol would be to fill the, you know, vacant, if there were a vacant spot. I mean, honestly, there probably would not necessarily be a vacant spot. There would be a downsized receiver slash clerk. So there would be one of those two positions eliminated and one of those two remaining. I'm just going to say that again, most likely. At this point, it's not like that, you know, anybody has a person, but you can just, if you wanted to think about that. But I think that, you know, putting together a job description that the community can get behind and a process for filling those positions would be something that we would like to do in a very public way, so people feel confident and comfortable that we were looking for people with the right qualifications. Was there something else that we wanted to ask anybody about? No. I was just thinking again about, you know, again, moving in the direction. I think we're always taking baby steps in the direction of trying to find ways to do this better. We don't say that we have all the answers. I don't think we do. I don't think anybody does. Like I said, there's been a number of studies. I think CGR had done a study with the town and the village some years back, and they're a larger consulting company that does a lot of work with consolidation, and they had looked at, you know, which departments make the most sense for consolidation. These were certainly some of the areas that popped. Some of the areas have really already been tackled, as I mentioned. You know, the police services, the fire services, somebody mentioned we just lost a important member of our community recently, Cadoza Woody Worthy, who had run for village treasurer, and he ran on a platform of hire me to fire me, basically. And they did change the treasurer from an elected position to an appointed position, and we've had one ever since. And I'm not sure that the public notices if their services have got changed at all. I don't necessarily know that anybody could say that they have, and I think that it's just interesting to note that. And again, if there's information that would help you or would help your neighbors or would help your friends to think about this, please let us know, and we'd love to help provide that information and share any studies or any research or information from other communities who maybe are in a slightly different situation now than they were before, that might look like something we're going towards.
Thought. I see where you're going with this, and eventually it's going to have to include the village in this consolidation, if you will. Not that we're there yet, but how does the village feel about that? Is there an openness to the possibility of combining these important services and saving money?
So, I mean, we started with the village in this process, and the village is still with us. They just weren't quite ready to talk about this. I think that, you know, we have an ever-changing landscape, as you know, with as elected offices change, you have different people who are sitting in those policy-setting seats, and we have, you know, village manager has not been there for a tremendously long time and hasn't necessarily had the experience with the town and the village and looking at all those, you know, issues from sort of like up here for that long. She's been there for a little over a year. So I think that it's, you know, I don't know the answer to the question, Elaine, is the village there yet? Maybe they were there, maybe they weren't there then, maybe they're here now. I don't really know, but again, it's really up to the people, ultimately. And if we bring the public along with us to make these decisions, not necessarily putting every one of them up for a vote, but making the decisions in a way that people understand and again feel like it's not going in a bad direction, it's going in a better direction. If people feel like that's the case and we can actually provide that and produce that for people, I think then we can bring everybody along with us. But I don't have all the answers, I'm going to say again. I'm hoping that you guys are going to help us get there. Okay? Is there anything else? I don't want to cut anybody off. my colleague in the back there, is there anything that you would, oh, I was going to say, Elaine, before I go on, you're a perfect person to ask, Jim and Elaine, who you've lived in the village, and so you've had the opportunity to see what services are like from the village and from the town. So, I mean, maybe you can comment. Do you think that there's a stark differentiation between the way that you were served in one community versus another? Because that's a fear of many people, that they're going to now suddenly have to have these types of services or those types of services, and that they're not as good. So I think it would be helpful to hear a little bit, without naming names, of how you feel about that.
Well, I think in all cases we have, as I said, been well served, and I didn't even really see a difference for the brief time that we lived in the town. And we now live in the village. We live on Cedar Lane. Our side of Cedar Lane toward the river is in the village. The other side of Cedar Lane is in the town. So they get twice a week pick up garbage, whatever. We get different days, so 4 times a week we could bring our our stuff over there if we didn't quite make it. And then the recyclables, everything is duplicated, and it's so funny to see those guys come by, pick up their garbage, and then our guys coming in the other direction picking up ours. It is ludicrous to have that kind of duplication of services, but I mean, it's nice for us. Do you have anything to say about that?
No.
It's all good, though. I mean, they do a good job.
Yeah, I think services in both the village and the town are well executed. The quality of leadership has improved dramatically over the should we say the bad old days, and I think that it's really just a matter of finding some modus vivendi that allows what are going to be things that presumably both entities think are rational, to get them done and not allow a lot of sort of political flack to get in the way. And candidly, I think that while they're independent power bases, that the town has probably should take a leadership role, since you cover all of the above, and so this is appropriate that you're doing it.
I'm going to go back to my town board colleague back there. If you want, do you want to add anything about your unincorporated resident? I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add.
One thing that came to, based on your comment, the one thing that came to mind, I'm in the unincorporated town, and I have a similar issue where the first 2 houses are Village of Briarcliff, so the garbage truck comes to their 2 houses, turns around in the loop, and then actually it's the same day, so the next garbage truck comes probably 2 hours later. So it is strange, and it's redundant services, and those are the kinds of things that we really need to look at, because it is strange and wasteful and odd, and so that was the only thing that came to mind. And wonderful. And wonderful if you have extra garbage, yes. And you have neighbors that you're friends with.
Okay.
You just have to make sure that they don't see you. Hurry over there at 7:15 to put your garbage down.
Sir, do you have any questions or statements that you'd like to make?
I was just thinking, I grew up in a town that merged villages, 2 of the 3. Like this town, there was a village that didn't want to go along for about the same reasons. And when the 2 villages merged, the hot button issue became garbage collection. I don't know whether they were being paid at different rates or not, but they went to outsource it. They got rid of the municipal garbage collection. And that's what you've got here, is my understanding, municipal versus outside.
Yes. Are you in one
I'm in the village of Ossining.
Yes, and that's true. Just a comment. Again, in the short term, in our brief discussions, again, sort of off-site discussions of what could happen, most likely at the beginning, nothing's going to change. And maybe down the line, nothing's going to change. But, I would never make a comment of what direction the village would go, but outsourcing is, in some regards, easier because you don't need to maintain those trucks, the very expensive trucks, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, you have staff in the village that can, after the garbage collection is done, can then just be, sent out to do other tasks. So, there's upsides and downsides. But initially, the village doesn't have the operation where they could suddenly start picking up refuse for the town. Not initially, for sure. Unincorporated that could not happen. So, as I said, services. I don't think anybody would ever feel the difference in services. Would you not have this person to call or that person to call? Okay, you wouldn't, but you're still going to get somebody at the desk who's going to help you and make sure that you're treated with respect and that whatever your issue you might have is handled and taken care of and directed in the right place to the right place. Do you have anything you'd like to add, unincorporated resident of Town of Ossining? Okay. Okay, well, with that, I think that we are going to conclude our little community conversation about Project Forward, and we are very thankful for those of you who have participated in this conversation. We certainly hope that we have more people coming out tonight because we really want to hear from everybody, and then we will go back to the town board to make a decision how we'd like to proceed forward, and hopefully we will be able to draw a conclusion in short order. Yes, this is going to be on GoTV. This will be on the town website. This will be available on the town website. That's why we asked, and on YouTube, on the YouTube town site. So thank you, Tom, and on GoTV. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day, and feel free to talk to us without this microphone in my hand. And thank you, Michael. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you. There's only like 10 people here. Thank you all. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jackie. George? I think he said his name was George. I don't know.